Hello everybody, so this video is entitled "The Bloodbath Continues." Speechless. I am speechless. Well, no, I'm not. I have a little bit of commentary. But of course, my time difference with the US is still 12 hours, so I wake up and I see the blood. And this is what happened yesterday. Absolutely insane. Google down 7%. I looked at the earnings. The earnings were not bad at all for Google. It was good. I liked everything. I mean, what I read, I like a lot of stuff on Google. Down 7%, I cannot explain that. Okay. When you look at Tesla down 15%, we can debate. That one we can debate whether it deserves to be down or not. I agree with a lot of analysts that the ramp of robotaxi is much slower than we expected on Tesla. So we can debate whether that drop is warranted or not on Tesla. Still, I think it's overdone. Still, I think it's way overdone. But this is especially true for Google. Out of the blue, just down 7%. It was par for the course. Of course, the Nasdaq down 2%. The Nasdaq back at early May, late April levels. Are we gonna go back down to the peak MidEast tension prices again? Are we going to do that? Every night there seems to be more fears of escalations. We now have potentially two straits to deal with. I see the Houthis started attacking ships on the other side of Saudi Arabia. Crazy stuff going on. It's just bad. Everything's bad. Everything's bad. It's just bad. There's no liquidity. There's no bid. Nothing can catch a bid. And there's a horrifying 10-year. The 10-year is at 4.7%. This is absolutely crazy. There's nowhere to hide. The 10-year is this high, which means that the bonds. I was looking at the TLT, right? I was looking at the TLT. You know, traditionally they say, oh, you should have a 60-40 portfolio. One should have exposure to bonds. Let's say you seek stability. You want exposure to bonds. From what I look at the chart, aside from some moment in 2002 or 2003, aside from that, TLT is pretty much at an all-time low, like historical low. In the history of TLT is at the lowest it's ever been. TLT is down 50% from the events of 2020. And if I were to look at the average price of TLT right back in the 2010s, the late 2010s, we're down 30% on TLT. So bonds and supposedly stable assets are no place to hide. And that's why I think if one were to look at the indices, the only thing that has performed well is the Nasdaq, quite frankly, if you look at the indices. But why has the Nasdaq performed so well? It's all about AI. If you remove the performance of stocks like Nvidia, stocks like Micron, stocks like a lot of the smaller players, right, AMD, etc., if you remove the performance of these stocks from the Nasdaq would not show nearly as good of a performance. In fact, if you look at, say, Amazon or the XLY, consumer discretionary, if you look at that performance, we're up something like 17% over the 5-year period. So if you look at the S&P 500, many sectors are not up at all, right? A lot of that hike is due to Nvidia going ballistic, but there's been nowhere to hide. So the 2020s continue to remain a lost decade. We continue towards our lost decade. And now I just want to briefly address two specific stocks that did not necessarily see a bloodbath. So let me just talk about HIMS. A few people asking me in the comment section what I think about HIMS. HIMS shines bright, but of course HIMS crashed towards the end of the day. I mean, I guess we're up 7%, but down 7% compared to the midday price. But it's not nearly as good as what we had been at one point. We're up 10% at one point. Unfortunately, HIMS also impacted by macro. It seems like HIMS is going to be trading based on peptides from now on. And it's a very big news that we would have potentially 4 peptides that would be recommended for approval by the FDA or for easing restrictions by the FDA. And I don't really know what they mean by easy restrictions. I'm assuming allowing compounding of them. Now, I want to address Martin Shkreli. He's gone viral talking about how peptides are fake medicine and that he's shorting the stock. Peptides are not medicine. They are not medicine. They are short chains of amino acid. They are naturally occurring in the human body for most of them. And in my view, they're much closer to supplements than they are to medicine. The reason why GLP-1 peptides are medicines is because they modify them slightly to be able to patent them. So as we go deeper into proteomics, we are able to discover compounds that are much smaller than, say, your vitamins, etc., that you would take. So that's kind of a regulatory battle here. The FDA clearly claims, oh, it's us. We have to regulate that. Kind of like crypto. People claiming, oh, is it the CFTC or is it the SEC that should regulate crypto? We have these new discoveries, and we don't really know who's going to regulate them. It seems like in the US, it would be only the FDA who would do that, right? It seems like that in the US, but obviously they don't do anything about it. If peptides are not addressed, China is going to be even more dominant in peptides, and China will entirely own one of the revolutions in medicine. So we have to be very careful allowing US companies to get into that business if we don't want to lose to Chinese peptides and repackage Chinese peptides around the world. Peptides are fake medicine. I would argue they're not medicine. They're slightly different than medicine. They're medicines if you modify them and patent them. Then yeah. But otherwise, I would argue they're not. Anyways, lastly, talk about Bitcoin. Who would have thought Bitcoin would hold like this? Not me. When I see the bloodbath we have in other stocks, I wouldn't have thought Bitcoin would have dropped like this. It just shows that assets just follow their own cycles, and even though it seems on really bad days like yesterday, it seems like correlations go to 1. It seems like Bitcoin bottomed way earlier than the rest of the stocks, and Bitcoin actually hovering in fear, but close to neutral. You can see it wants to get close to neutral. So I'm very pleased with performance of Bitcoin, especially because Bitcoin had a lid on it because of a Middle East tension back months ago, right? We had that lid. It was all driven by the Middle East. And now what do we find is that Bitcoin doesn't seem to be impacted by some of the worst Middle East news it's pretty much the worst Middle East news we've had since the beginning of this conflict. So I'm very impressed by Bitcoin. We conclude with strategy, of course. I'm coming back to the US on Sunday. Therefore, it's going to be tricky to make my usual strategy videos this Sunday. But strategy, let's talk about strategy. Strategy is underperforming Bitcoin. It's not supposed to do that. In theory, strategy, Bitcoin over a 5-day period here, if you look at the past 5 days, Bitcoin up 3%, strategy only up 2.6%. Why is the delta? Why isn't strategy behaving like amplified Bitcoin? Well, you'll know the answer if you follow this stock. It's very simple. Sailor likely ATMing like mad to raise cash for STRC. Sailor ATMing like mad to raise cash for STRC. That's what I think is happening. Sacrificing the common in order to save the STRC asset and allow the Bitcoin per share accretion machine to turn back on. Allow that machine to turn back on. Strategy is going to valley of despair. This valley of despair, in my view, and other Bitcoin-related assets, right, and the preferreds, they are going through a valley of despair. This valley of despair will be done, in my view, once Bitcoin goes back up. Bitcoin 100,000 solves a whole lot of problems, including these. But unfortunately, who would have thought that this rout in the market is it month 9 now? Almost month 10. Since early October of 2025, we've had this madness. And by madness, I mean back-to-back negative macro developments. Back-to-back. We've had no rest. It went from shutdown to new tariff fears to Greenland to the Middle East to arguably hawkish Fed chair. That was also a surprise. We've had non-stop awful macro backdrop. So we need macro to improve, and I still don't trust this market. I still don't trust it until we start to see some positive lasting developments. It's tough to have trust in this market. I think there's a lot of crazy casino-like moves that can't really be explained rationally. At least that's what I think. Anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice. This is not peptide advice. This is only entertainment. I'm hoping you were entertained. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.